El Brewing Business Podcast, Episode Cuatro. That is the theme of today's podcast, which is the Southwest, where my hometown, Tucson, Arizona is, which is also the home to Borderlands Brewing Company, where I get to sit down inside the brewery with Mike Mallozzi. We had an awesome conversation up at the bar. We shared a couple of beers and had a great conversation just about beer and business and everything that this podcast is about. And afterwards, me and Mike spent at least an hour talking and doing a tour of the brewery where I could just see the ins and outs of everything that he does on a daily basis. So without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome to Brewing Business, where brewing, business, and beer collide for yet another epic show. Join your host, Tim Nichols, as he talks with today's top brewers and brewery owners. Mash the barley, boil the wort, add a dash of hops, sit back, and grab a beer. Cheers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brewing Business Podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. He is a PhD in microbiology, Mike Mallozzi, and he is here in brewery. We're doing this interview and we are going to have a great conversation about breweries and business and beer, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So, Mike, now that I've had a little bit of an introduction on you, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I actually grew up in Colorado, went to school in Fort Collins, which probably a lot of your listeners know is kind of a mecca for craft beer. And my senior year, when I was finishing up my undergrad degree in microbiology, worked for Budweiser because they used to hire science majors in their quality assurance department. So that kind of gave me a little bit of taste of how the science and beer worlds interact. And it actually, working for the man, made me want to pursue a higher degree because it wasn't exactly my dream job. So after I finished grad school in Chicago, I was actually looking to move back out west, and one of the professors in my department got a job at the University of Arizona, so I moved out here with her. But I didn't really know anyone there, and I actually met my business partner playing kickball, and we started homebrewing together, and I guess you might say the rest is history.
Right. So tell me a little bit more about Kickball Mondays there where you met your business partner.
Yeah, so I actually started playing because one of my sister's friends, which was like the only person I kind of knew here, was finishing her master's degree here. And they used to get together and play kickballs every Monday. Of course, it was slosh ball. I think we used to get a keg on second base. So it was a lot of fun, and I found out one of the guys on the team, my now business partner, Miles Stone, was interested in homebrewing, and he had all the equipment, and I didn't have anything after grad school. So we started homebrewing together, and pretty much after the first batch, we started jokingly saying we should open a brewery.
Awesome. So what's the story behind the name Borderlands?
Yeah, so when we were kind of talking about getting more serious about opening the brewery, we realized that of the 3 breweries that existed in Tucson, none had really sort of captured kind of the culture of the, southern Arizona region, which is a border town, basically. It's got a lot of Mexican cultural influences and kind of that mix of cultures that only happens at the border. And so we were trying to capture that in our name, and Borderlands seemed to fit perfectly.
Great stuff. What an interesting, dynamic with Arizona. This is my hometown, Tucson, Arizona. So, and I notice in a lot of your beers, there's a lot of Mexican heritage and a lot of Hispanic culture.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us just a little bit about some of the beers that are upcoming?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we felt was important for us, not only from a business standpoint, but just being a part of the culture, was important for us. So we try to use as many local ingredients and local flavors that we can, as well as Spanish names. So, for example, our Noche Dulce Vanilla Porter, which is one of our most popular beers, we just started canning it. It has Mexican vanilla in it, and it's based in Arizona Vanilla Company, which is based up in Phoenix. It's got a really nice flavor. We also have our La Morena, which means brunette in Spanish, and that's our pecan nut brown, and we actually get the pecans from Green Valley, which is just a little bit south of here. So those are some of the kinds of beers that we have. Those are definitely two of our flagships. We have a prickly pear wheat, which uses the juice of a prickly pear cactus fruit. That's really nice. And so pretty much every single beer that we make, we try to find something local that we can put into it.
Great stuff. I mean, like I said earlier, being in the Southwest and just the whole Mexican Hispanic culture area, just great that you're really able to bring that out of here. So what I really want to know more about is how you got started homebrewing.
Sure. Well, when I was in college, we used to get a keg of something nice to start a party off with, and then switch to the cheap yellow fizzy stuff after that. But it got us interested, and especially going to college in a place like Fort Collins got us interested in what goes into making a beer. So we used to dabble a little bit. I'd have to say most of our creations were not that great. But it definitely piqued my interest about, what goes into a beer, what is the process like. And so that's what really got me into it.
Great. Now, you talked a little bit more about being a PhD in microbiology. So can you expand on a little bit more about what you did before you started the brewery?
Yeah, so I actually, in undergrad, I worked in a lab for a couple years before I started working at Budweiser. And then in grad school, my PhD was actually on anthrax. So it was infectious disease. But I took a job here, and I'm still actually part-time at the university doing microbiology research. But mostly it's infectious disease and trying to prevent it. But it's kind of interesting because I became interested in the history of science and beer. And it turns out they have an extremely interlinked history. So the inventor of the microscope, the man who's considered to be the grandfather of microbiology, his name is Anton von Leeuwenhoek. He invented the microscope. He actually came from a family of brewers and was the first person to visualize yeast under the microscope. And Louis Pasteur, where we get pasteurization from, we think about it as pasteurized dairy products, but really his goal was to pasteurize wine and beer to preserve them. And so he would go around to different monasteries that were brewing and would try to figure out how do you pasteurize beer. And he later on helped figure out that yeast was actually responsible for fermentation. So it's a pretty interlinked history. It's pretty interesting.
Wow, I'm sure all of us are kind of getting our minds blown right now just by this mass amount of science that goes behind, this hobby that we all have, which is absolutely insane. So is there been any major setbacks or anything coming into the brewery business, coming from a microbiology background versus business background?
Yeah, I would have to say that, and even if you are in a business background, this can be a setback, but maybe you'll be expecting it more, which is the level of bureaucracy that is required to tolerate to open a business is something that's pretty surprising. I mean, there's a lot of bureaucracy in science too, but you don't, I guess, expect it as much in the private sector. But there's a ton of bureaucracy, especially when it comes to alcohol. And so that was probably one of the most surprising things about opening a business.
Right. I've had a couple of guests on that have spoken about the different types of paperwork and the long processes you have to go through to get a liquor license, and your brewery has to be within X amount of feet or whatever from a school or church, or something like that.
Yeah, and depending on the city that you live in and the state that you live in, those processes can be more or less hard, or more or less bureaucratic. But one thing that we were kind of pleasantly surprised by was the fact that we opened up in downtown, and Tucson's downtown has undergone a major rejuvenation in the past few years. And it's no coincidence, because the city has been kind of streamlining projects in the downtown area to help that along, and we were part of that movement. And so it helped, open a lot of doors and kind of give the green light to things that might have taken longer if we were opening somewhere else in the city.
So at what point did you think, between all the science, the microbiology, getting your PhD, did you think, man, I got to make beer my business? Tell me that story that really got you saying that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because it took me 7 years to finish my PhD, so it's definitely a huge commitment. And I thought in no way would that apply to opening a brewery, but the science world is kind of undergoing a lot of turmoil right now. There's a lot of cutbacks in the amount of funding in the science world, and so people that have gone into science, especially the biological sciences, are having to make a decision about, do they work for industry? Do they try and find something else to do? And I realized that I had kind of lost some of my ambition for it, because the climate is getting tougher and tougher to really make it, especially in academic science. And so I was looking for another passion, and opening a brewery is kind of one of those dreams where you're like, we'll put that in the probably not gonna happen category.
Right.
But after finishing something as hard as finishing a PhD, you kind of realize that you can do more than you think you're capable of. And it actually I was surprised how much sort of respect people had for getting a PhD, because in the reality of the situation, it has nothing to do with opening a business. But what I think it does tell to people, which, we didn't have any money when we opened this business, and we had to get it from friends and family and then other investors. And when the investors look at your resume and see that you completed a PhD, it basically means that you have stick-to-itiveness. And that, more than anything, I think is a talent or a skill that you have to cultivate to make it.
Right. So having that PhD, just really showed that you were able to, stick to the business, that you're not just going to take these people's money and then get 5 minutes into this thing and say, we're bored of it, or it's too hard, or there's too much going on, we can't do it. So that's great. So I'm glad that you have that part of your resume, and I'm glad that's been part of your success so far. And so what is a common problem that comes from owning a business or running a brewery of this size?
Well, I think one of the problems of running a brewery this size, so we're on 20-barrel system. Right now we're probably producing about 100 barrels a month, but we started on a 3-barrel system, and within 8 months we had to upgrade our system. So growing pains, I think, is one of the many common problems of a brewery this size, and you can see it happening to most of the breweries in this town. And so managing growth it's tough, we had to shut down for a few months to totally revamp our brewing area to accommodate the much, much larger system that we were putting in. And so that was a challenge. And then when you're brewing that much more beer, you got to find the accounts for it. And we started self-distributing. So I was driving all over town with kegs in the back of my car, trying to service accounts. And then just this last January, we signed with a distributor down here in Tucson. And so that has been wonderful, because I'm not, talking on the phone while I'm driving around town, trying to do emails at stoplights and things like that. So that's been great. Yeah.
So have you guys left the state as far as allocating your beer out, or are you guys still stuck in Arizona?
It's kind of interesting. There's actually, as far as I'm aware, only one brewery in the state that's actually distributing across state lines, and it's not even the biggest brewery. So in this, at least the current state of affairs in Arizona is the local market is pretty much wide open, and it's so much easier to try to fill in that market than it is to go across state lines. Okay. But if we did, it would probably be, New Mexico or California or Nevada. southern Nevada.
So staying in the Southwest area. Okay.
And I think that's kind of our goal, is to grow to that point where we're kind of a well-known regional brewery, and then just we don't need to be a Sam Adams. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
It's too much work.
Yeah. I mean, even then, I mean, like Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head and Sam Adams. I mean, I assume that they don't even get to look at their brewery anymore, just being that big, and it's more of a conglomerate than it is just a nice home business that you really can take pride in, I guess.
Totally.
So
yeah.
So what's the next big thing for Borderlands?
So the next big thing, we actually just added on a new outdoor beer garden, and we're going to be building a bocce ball court, and we just added a new private event space. So we probably be doing a lot of weddings, things like that. And then another big thing coming up is we're actually going to be branching out a little bit, and we're working on getting our domestic farm winery license so that we can make ciders and meads. So that's kind of been an exciting step, because we do get quite a few customers coming in who are, gluten-free or just don't like beer, and a lot of times it's a couple where one of the partners likes beer and one of them can't drink beer.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing. My girlfriend, she only drinks wine. I only drink beer. So.
Right. And so we want to have that option where people can come here, and canning was another big one. So we just started canning our first beer, and it's been a huge success, and it's growing exponentially. And so that's been a huge step for us, and it's introducing us to more people in the marketplace, because before you could only go to a bar or a restaurant to get our beer, and now people can pick it up at Whole Foods, so that's been really exciting.
Awesome. So for the first half of this interview, though, you have killed it, and I just want to thank you again for being out, for letting me come into the brewery. And if we can go ahead and take a quick beer break. So what are you having over there?
I have our Las Almas, which is a Belgian dark strong, and it's something that we make every year for the Day of the Dead celebration here in Tucson.
All right, awesome. And I'm drinking the vanilla porter. What's the name of the one again?
It's Noche Dulce.
Noche Dulce.
Sweet night.
Sweet night. All right. So here we go. We're going to jump back into this. We're going to go into the second half of this interview, where I just give you some quick fire round questions. So just kind of give me the first thing that comes to your mind, and then we're going to go ahead and get started if you're ready.
That's like the hot seat. All right.
The hot seat. You're getting in there. So where do you see the future of craft beer?
Sessions. I think the future of craft beer is people who want a nice, great flavored beer, but don't want to get bombed drinking it. And I think sessions and sours are the two next big things in craft beer.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think everybody else can feel this when you're drinking like a real heavy stout that's like a 13% ABV, and you're just like, I would like to have another beer, but I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then sours for me, I mean, sours are just like my all-time favorite style of beer, and just everything about it, and just the weird fermentations that go into it. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad that's going to be a huge part of the future of craft beer.
Our sour that we make, we just started. We were one of the first breweries in Arizona to start making it, and it's been a huge success. We actually just got nominated by the Arizona Society of Homebrewers for Best Sour in the state, so that was a great honor.
Wow, awesome,
yeah.
Great. So what has been the proudest moment thus far since opening?
I would say definitely the cans. That definitely felt like a huge milestone where you actually have packaged beer. I don't know, something about, the ability to just see it on a shelf somewhere in a grocery store. That's
it's got to be a big milestone, big, huge.
Yeah, totally.
So if you could choose one internet website or like a book to educate our listeners, what would that be and why?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question.
It always is a tough question for people. I don't know.
Well, there is a pretty good book. It's called Designing Great Beers. That's pretty packed with great information if you're looking for, information about style guidelines and kind of what goes into making a great stout. It's kind of a good foundation for just a reference for if you want to make a new style.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you use any beer software, kind of like Beersmith or Beer Run?
Oh, yeah. So Nigel, our brewmaster, uses Beersmith a lot whenever we're crafting a new recipe, which we do all the time because we actually have 3 6-barrel tanks, which are kind of like our fun brew tanks, and we're making new styles all the time for collab brews or seasonals or what have you.
Great. And for all you listeners out there, you can find all these interesting notes and apps and resources on the show notes right after this episode. And coming into the last question of this interview, with all the knowledge you have now and you could do it all over again, what would you do differently and why?
That's a good question. So I think I would have definitely started with a bigger brew house in the beginning. It was quite a challenge to upgrade from 3 barrels to 20 barrels, and I think even if I had to delay the opening of the brewery, I think I would have just gone big right at the beginning, because that was a huge challenge during the upgrade.
Great. And go ahead and just tell us the best way that we can connect with Borderlands Brewing Company, and we're going to go ahead and say goodbye.
Sure, no problem. You can find us at borderlandsbrewing.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
That was Mike Mallozzi, everybody, and I have to say, Mike, you killed it on the mic today, and thank you so much for letting me come into the brewery, and I feel like we had a great time, and we had some great beer. So thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, please go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review Brewing Business. And you can connect with me through the Brewing Business website, brewingbusinesspc.com, and on Twitter at Tim Nichols on Tap. Until next time, cheers.